Hey everybody, welcome back. Hopefully the narration sounds a little better. I know it's kind of sounded like shit for a lot of these, and sorry about that. I'm not really an expert with this stuff. I think I've got the microphone in a good place for this, although in this position it also picks up a lot of my breathing, so I'm not sure what's best, honestly. I try. Hopefully you can understand me at least. This is not a professional quality thing, as you well know by now. But anyway, to the matter at hand, we're in Stoic's hideout here, his new hideout. This spiral cave. Kind of a spooky thing. You know, I hadn't read the Uzumaki manga yet, which is all about spirals, if you haven't heard of it. Nothing to do with Naruto. But actually, I think Mark designed this map, so he probably had by then. He was sort of into that before me. Oh, it's Rana. And sort of takes her out of commission pretty quick. Oh, hey. Come on. Come on. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. But then Solest knocks her out nice and quick. Where'd that come from? What's going on here? It's actually a line from Mallrats. Although, well, it's a pretty generic line, you could say, in a lot of situations, but in Mallrats, it's pretty funny. And now Solest is back, although they don't really know it's him yet. But Stoic figures it out upon that reference to how he was killed. The Solest face, I think he was supposed to have bright eyes. I talked about that, didn't I? Alright, well I won't go into that again. But, but we're about to get a big surprise here. More ways than one. And Shroud is, of course, incensed because of the massacre in Undermoss. Oh, here we go. Boom. Look at that thing. That is one hell of a sprite. Of course, since this is Anchor, it was also made by the artist who goes by Anchor. So that's 3 for 3 for the main creators of this game being referenced in the game. Of course, Volrath is Volrath Blacksteel, and Artbane is basically Kingbane. His first name is Arthur, so that's Artbane. And then this, of course, is Anchor, who I believe, much like the Teutoncore, was named after a Warcraft character, our artist's Warcraft character. And they're about to fight, and Stoic tells them to run, which is, not typical. So already, Stoic's afraid of this guy. They're going to be some trouble. And of course, it's a bit of a mystery because, as far as the player knows at this point, Anchor died in the fight at Volrath's castle. So they're kind of like, huh. But this little Finley game here kind of feels spur of the moment. Where you have to shoot the dynamite in order to sort of stop his advance. And this got a lot harder when Mark changed the shooting thing, the way that works, because you don't have a whole lot of time to make the shot. When you were using the mouse, see, I messed it up. But you can take a couple hits without getting killed. But I bet Baron's going to be feeling that one later. Come on. There we go. Whew, that was close. Okay, so this is the last one, I think. And this, if I remember right, he slows down. Yeah, try to trick you. But I got him. So when you use the mouse, that was really very easy, but... Oh, okay. Right. I think that's a reward for doing a decent job. I might have got something better if I hadn't gotten hit, but what are you going to do? So he's... behind the rubble for now, but he starts shaking the whole room, so he can't stay here for long. And what the hell was that? I like this conversation. There's a lot of good, funny bits here, even though it's pretty deadly serious. Yes, that's what Shroud's saying when I was mentioning before, that they haven't heard the whole story. And, well, I'm sure it isn't. But these aren't normal circumstances, Laurel. I knew it. I knew this is what he was up to. I really hate being right all the time. And then, then Baron goes, yep, not easy. As if he can sympathize with being right all the time. I don't know. That's kind of a little, it's a bit of a subtle gag, but I always liked it. So now we start the third flashback here. Now this, you remember, of course, that the Volrath story was sort of a reimagining of the first game I ever did on RPG Maker, the one with Volrath in it. Now, between that and Clean Slate, which was probably started like 2 years later, maybe, there were a lot of other, well, not a lot, but a few different projects that I sort of stopped and started that would have helped bridge the gap between those two stories. So the gist of the sort of middle story here that I unsuccessfully tried to do a long time ago was this idea of a second rebellion by this guy Stephen, who is inspired by Volrath's example and reignites the conflict. Now, in my original game that I started and didn't finish, there was a lot of like different plots that I was going back and forth with. Unlike the Volrath story, where that's really very straightforward. You go here, then you go there, then you go there. I was getting more ambitious in terms of narrative. So there was a story about three guys sort of fighting an undead, like a necromancer. I can't remember his name, but they were fighting a necromancer and like who was going around with undead, causing trouble. And there were three guys, and one of them would be eventually revealed to be Volrath's son. Although I didn't quite get to that point in the story, but that's what was going to happen. Now the villain of that project was her, Alyssa. And this I really like this music for her. I used it as often as I could during these flashback bits. It's actually it's a remix from Echo the Dolphin, of all things. It sounds kind of funny, but those games had some really immersive music. I used a lot in Clean Slate, and Laurel's geeking out over Alyssa. She's sort of terrified of her the same way that, like, a young kid might be scared of, Freddy Krueger or some shit. And so, in the game, Alyssa was known as the Time Witch. She was sort of experimenting with magic to kind of bend the flow of time and space, basically. And she was sort of, and that became a thing. Like, she was interfering with time, and like all these characters were like popping up. Like Volrath was sort of plucked from his time, and shit like that. And it got to be, it just got to be like a hassle. So, and so I tossed out like the time shit for this version because it just, I was sort of reaching beyond my capacity there. Because I wanted to have them go into the future and be in like this all futuristic city. But like, that was when the game like stopped dead, because there was really like nothing in the, because keep in mind, there weren't a whole lot of RPG Maker resources at that time. I was still using 2000. And, you had like random people making tile sets, but there was no like official releases like they do now, where they get like really good artists and have them put out these great tile sets. Back then, and there was good stuff being made by like the community, but it wasn't like there's nothing that would have quite fit for what I was imagining, like this futuristic city. Like I tried mapping it with some stuff that was out there, and it was just so limited. Like it just so that was basically the end of that project. Now the other plot lines that I mentioned were there was Mephisto's daughter, who they called Cardinal because she had red hair. And she was sort of this kind of like spoiled, bratty girl who just like was oblivious to other people's feelings, like really kind of almost an anti-hero. And there's all these guys like in her life, and she sort of alienated some, and it was very like it was a product of high school, to be sure. So that was, she's not really in this because she didn't really belong in the story. She had very little impact on the story. It was that other plot with Voras's son and his allies that really drove most of it. And then there was Lock, Stock, and TSB. They sort of came in. You remember them from Clean Slate, and then they were in Master of the Wind. This game. What am I playing? They were undead, and this was sort of another they were another group that was sort of taken out of time. So they were in it, and it was just, it was just too ambitious, too unwieldy, not really well thought out. So when I stopped doing that, I kind of went in a different direction, trying to deal with this this time period where it was about a kid who was in school in the city of Solest, and he starts to realize that the story, that the stories he's heard about Vorath and that rebellion are not true. And it's right around the time that Stephen, who's one of his classmates, starts the rebellion, and he has to sort of pick his loyalties. I didn't get too far in that one either, but I liked the idea, and I think, Legacy sort of grew out of, I still would like to do a story about that, like sort of in a school. It's kind of about learning in a lot of ways. Certainly the monastery plot line grew out of that, and then Legacy, because I wasn't quite done with that idea. So that kid's name was Roland, by the way. I say that because he's mentioned like in one line of dialogue later, just to tie it together. And here we have I guess I should get back to what's happening here on screen. This is Enker's real death, where it takes two of his old friends to take him down. Meanwhile, Alyssa and Mephisto are doing their thing. General Mephisto, by the way, is the double resurrection guy. I think Shroud might have mentioned that a few lines ago. If not there, then it was in like a different scene. Who, if you recall, was alive and back to his original human form by the end of Vorath's story. And so Mephisto is fighting on behalf of the knighthood, but he doesn't really, he's conflicted about it. He knows that it's not quite what he remembers, because he was active during the kind of glory days of the knighthood when they fought the necromancers in that big war. And now it's sort of become like corrupted a bit, intolerant of dissent, and doesn't like that. But he knows that Alyssa is bad news, so he's sort of kind of forced into this position. And he knows lightning magic, which is why he can see in the dark, and he sees Zeno easily. And they have kind of a heart-to-heart here, because Mephisto is really sort of a diplomatic guy. He's not bloodthirsty. He's a good fighter, And I can't remember if it's this scene or a different one, but he, yeah, I think he's going to say it now, because he was sort of forced to use magic just to keep pace with what the necromancers were doing. And even though it was against the rules, I mean, they had to do it or they would have lost. So he understands, Vorath's points pretty well. And if he had been, if it weren't for Vorath's association with Thanatos, his old enemy, he might have, been on Vorath's side. And he sort of, in the original game, the first game I made with Vorath in it, Mephisto defeats Thanatos, but then he kind of steps out of the story a little bit. He doesn't want to fight. He wants to retire. But then by the time you get to this part of the story with the new war kicking up, he sort of reluctantly comes in to try and keep things from getting too out of control. And Zeno's kind of taken aback by this, because he did not expect to be treated like this. Doesn't have a whole lot of interactions with the Celendian knighthood, and they're all negative. So this is, a real unexpected thing that happens with him. And then he gets his two swords, because in my old game, Mephisto was had a two-sword approach, so sort of a successor to him in that way. And now this scene, oh man, the music in this arc is fucking beautiful. God, we were just breaking out all our best stuff. I like that background too. I'm not sure where he got it, but it's really nice. This is a scene that I think people don't really remember. Well, I mean, they remember that it happened because there's a pretty big, important thing that happens at the end of it. But in terms of like the game's themes and writing, I think people kind of forget it. Because I've been accused a few times of having, that Stoic doesn't go through enough of a character arc in the course of these flashbacks, that he's basically the same dude. And in some ways, I mean, that may be true. In some ways, just that like he basically has the same kind of moral convictions. But I mean, I addressed that like earlier, just the idea behind that. But this is an instance where he is forced to sort of confront his naive tendencies. Just the idea of that all the Celendian knights must be evil, or at least unkind. And now he's in a situation where, the enemy leader is somebody that he's started to admire, whereas the leader of, his side is a dick and just sort of obsessed with his own myth and trying to attain Vorath's level of fame. And without any thought to, like, the ideas. Like, Vorath wasn't about, like, fame. He wasn't interested in that. He acted because he felt compelled to, and because of his own anger and resentment at how he had been treated growing up. And so Zeno sort of has to acknowledge like the complexity of this particular situation in a way that he hadn't before. So I mean I think that's good character development. I don't know, maybe somebody knows something I don't, but so I don't think you can argue that he doesn't learn anything over the course of these 500 years or however much time this no longer actually than these flashbacks depict. And so this is sort of a blunt sequence where Alyssa just kills him on the spot. And I think there were some people who expected like a kind of a more dramatic death for Zeno, like maybe going down fighting against some army or whatever. But no, it was just Alyssa got pissed at him, and that was that. And I remember one of my good friends in the RPG community told me she cried a little bit at this because it was just so, like, brutal and unfair that all he did was try and speak up for what he thought was right, and that got him killed. And she's right, it is unfair. But, I mean, I think a lot of times that's what happens. And, you know, that's life, man. That's the world. You know, good deeds aren't usually rewarded. So now he's now a skelly. Alyssa herself resurrected him, which goes a long way to explaining, like, why he is the way he is, why he's so much bigger and stronger than your typical skeleton. Because she's really a pioneer in necromancy. And then that bit where he was sort of, you know, on his way to the afterlife, or however you want to interpret the bit with the white screen there. It's a little subversive. I don't know if that's the right word. Basically, he said that, like, if it had been his choice, he would have stayed dead. And that's, you know, that's the kind of thing people don't really want you to say. You know, that, like, death would be preferable to life. But, you know, obviously a lot of people feel that way. You look at the stats about suicide. Certainly, you know, I've had my moments where I felt like that. But I think that frightens people to admit that. But I think rather than, you know, kind of condemn that idea, or, you know, you got to admit that, like, there's something wrong with the world if that's happening to people. I mean, yes, you know, there's mental illness, you know, stuff like that. I mean, there are other factors. But, like, honestly, that's, you know, it's an unnatural thing. And so you got to wonder, like, what's happening that makes it such a good option for people, or that they think it's a good option. I mean, if you look at, you know, every time there's a fucking shooting in this country, which is like every week, you know, you always get people coming out saying, like, oh, you know, gotta do something about mental health. But, like, do they really know what that means? You know? But I'll get back to that in a minute. But, like, I want to talk about this bit here because I really like this one scene here. I think, you know, the music and the rain and that map, and him coming out the first time in his, you know, his true form, I guess, or his current form. I think that's a kind of a powerful image. So I was pretty happy with that. But we'll probably wrap this up in a few minutes. I want to finish my point here because I think it's important that when you talk about mental health, I mean, it's not just, you know, oh, yeah, people should see therapists, people should, you know, get the right medication. It's a lot more than that. You know, if you think about, and this is going to be sort of specific to America, so, I mean, that's where I live, so that's what it's going to be. You think about what mental health really means. You know, it's like, you know, not being able to live on your salary is bad for your mental health. You know, working day in and day out and not being able to take a vacation, that's bad for your mental health. You know, getting the flu and having to go into work anyway because you don't have any sick time or used it all, that's bad for your mental health. Reading about mass shootings every week is bad for your mental health, for fuck's sake. So I think if you really wanted to fix mental health, like they say they want to do, you've got a big undertaking in front of you. You know, but I mean, they don't really care. It's just because they don't want people saying that, you know, we shouldn't be giving out guns to any fucking nut who walks into a shop. But, so they sort of change the topic. If it's not that, it's the video games, which I won't even get into right now. Fucking stupid. Or a movie about the Joker. You know, because we all know fucking violent psychos wait for a movie to give them permission before they go and hurt people. Give me a fucking break with that shit. Sorry. You get what you fucking deserve. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting a little mad now. but stuff's been in the news a lot lately. But anyway, so they're trying to figure out another way to get into the cave. There's another entrance, and but they have to sort of get around Anchor, and they have to get around this this cliff here. And they were going to go this. This was the quicker way, but it's high tide, so it's flooded. Oh, a shotgun. That's kind of fun. There's a lot of... did it stop again? No, I don't know why it's doing that. There's a lot of like water-based enemies in here, so that's going to be pretty useful. I don't know if I should... Yeah, I'll keep the water one, because fire's not going to do any good. Okay. So let's head over. I just want to get off this map. This is a big-ass map, though. These little guys. Very angular-looking water scorpions. Oh, yeah, and like it's funny, they just crawl out. There's a chance that they'll just crawl out of the water, which I thought was pretty cool. You know, Mark's good with stuff like that. It comes up with these clever little twists. And I'm trying to think, there's oh, another one came out. Look at that. We got a lot of experience. Now, what was I saying? Right. So there's a couple other monsters you can encounter in this sequence. There's the, like, Pherolodites, which, you know, we've probably seen a little bit already. And then there's, like, a big squid dude. I can't remember his name. He's got, like, a goofy name. We'll see it, you know, if not this time, the next time, I bet. And he, like, has, like, fucking mind control over these other guys or whatever. And he can use it to, like, make them attack more often than they normally would. So that's a little devious. Alright, so we'll stop here. And then we'll start the dungeon. Alright. I will see you guys later. Peace.